we sang, run down the room, or every coyote in the country would be. Well, what you're going to hear today is what's referred to as traditional Ozarks fiddling. And I'll just, it's going to be completely foreign to some of you, probably most of you. Are any of you from the Ozarks? If you were, any musicians in your families, or?
A lot of friends that play bluegrass.
Yeah, well, of course, this is where bluegrass came from, was this stuff here. And this would be the start of it. This is the old stuff, and that's why we're the old men coming up with the old stuff.
So I know.
Yeah, this instrument, violin or fiddle, doesn't make any difference. It's a man that's playing it that makes the difference. And in our vocabulary now, violin's usually associated with classical or formal music, whereas this is associated with folk music. Although a lot of old fiddlers refer to their instrument as a violin, they didn't distinguish between the two. But that form emerged about the mid-1500s in Italy and spread across Europe into the British Isles, and as the old-timers used to say, across the pond into America, into the American continent. And the reason we know it was there by the 1600s, and the reason we know it's because the Puritans were preaching against it. And there are a lot of it's had a rough go over the centuries. Guilt by association, because we always associated with a lot of people do with dancing and things where there would be trouble, drinking and brawling and everything, And it came into Missouri, into the Ozarks, with the French up in Washington County, about 1723. And they brought their fiddlers with them, and they still play some of those tunes up there. A lot of people don't even know they exist up there around Potosi in that area. Nina Burton and Old Mines and Cadet and all that. And they still speak a dialect of 18th century French. And I had a tape of some of them, and when, last year, I guess the year before, French Public Radio came through, and I played that for them. I said, I've always heard that, and they said it was an old dialect of French. But they're trying to hang on, but the media is so strong, it's hard to keep children, keep these cultures alive. Well, anyway, so what we're going to do then is we'll just start off. The one thing that's always interesting about this music, if you get involved with it, is the variety. We don't sit down and play hornpipes all the time. It'd bore you to death, same thing. With me, because I've got the same progression. But we'll start off with some of the older tunes. And a lot of these tunes, the oldest one that I've read that they go back to, that they can document, is from the 1600s. It's a tune called Cuckoo's Nest that you still hear played around here. Another thing is, this is all oral. How much music do you read? Yeah, that answers it. But all this has come down.
I played for 6 months, playing 6 nights a week for dances in the biggest club in Joplin, and didn't know what key I was playing in.
I hope today we're a little better
now. I didn't. Still don't.
This, of course, along with the ballads, and in community, especially, I'll talk mostly about the Ozarks, but what I say about the Ozarks could pretty well be said about a lot of areas in this country. If they had one fiddler in their community, they were lucky, because this was their entertainment. And if he knew 2 tunes or 1 tune, that's okay, because square dancers, I always said they could dance to a steam engine, because it's the beat they're after. They want the time. That's what they're dancing to.
I'd done good then, wouldn't I?
Yeah, you did all right then. I don't know, probably all right. So this, and along with in the evenings, they come home and they'd play the fiddle, or they'd sing the ballads, or storytelling was another thing that was indigenous here in this region. And of course, all this came, they say Scotch-Irish, but really, if you want to talk about the Ozarks, you're going to say mostly British Isles is really, because a lot of the people by the time they got here were already 3rd and 4th generation Americans, because they came down from southern Pennsylvania, the Carolinas, Kentucky, Tennessee, and then in fact up until probably the 1950s or so, the vast majority of people from here on down into North Arkansas were descendants of Tennesseans. You'd ask people, where are you from? They'd say, where your people come from. They might mean what country, They'd say, no, Tennessee. That's what I always used to say. That's where all my people came from. But this came with them, and of course, the thing about it, they tell me easy to play. I don't play it. You play it though, so it must be easy to play.
Yeah.
That's what they say. But and it's you can play anything on it. Any emotion really, and it's easy to carry. You never saw a picture of a pioneer with a piano slung across the saddlebag, but they all brought these. And some of the fiddles that are played now around here, if you could trace them back, probably come from the 1700s. They were brought in with the parents of the people that come in. There's one little girl down at Seymour who's playing her, I think it's like 4th or 5th removed grandfather's fiddle. Been in the family that long. So we'll start off with, and of course another thing, here, I'll get this out of the way now. A lot of people say when they hear a fiddle, they say, well, it sounds like a bagpipe. Well, it does, because when this got into the British Isles, probably France too, places like that, the lead instrument in most groups was the bagpipe. And just like in England, when Bonnie Prince Charles got kicked out to France, and the Jacobites took over, they outlawed the bagpipe. Well, this instrument had been right there up at the shoulder of that bagpipe for years and years and years, and it copied the bagpipe music. So when you hear that drone sound, and that's the one old form of tuning is what we call cross tuning, but the formal tune is schottische, is like an A. How would you tune cross tune today?
Straight through, everyone tuned to A.
Yeah, but you have C sharp A, you have one.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, that was really copying the bagpipe, but the reason that came about was because for dances and stuff, it's easier to play that way, and it has more volume before the days of
that allows you, if you got a loose bow, you can hit 4-part harmony.
Yeah.
Because you've got your fiddle tuned.
You're only playing on a couple of strings. Well, we'll start off with one of the oldest ones, the hornpipe. Or let's see, yeah, we probably Fisher's is a good one. We played
Fisher's?
Yeah.
If I don't play the wrong one.
Well, I'll tell you, the other one has a good story too. These two, the names of these tunes are, there's no rhyme or reason to a lot of them. This one's called Fisher's Hornpipe, but it's not ER, it's AR. And there was a man in 1770s put out a little tune book of tunes, and this was one of the unnamed tunes, but since it was Fisher's book, they call it Fisher's Hornpipe. Is that D?
D.
Yeah.
See, no, is it G, ain't it?
No, it's
D.
They sound almost the same. At one time, they had a different timing to them. But what we did anyway in this country is we sped them all up to complement square dancing. So we call them hoedowns now. And practically all your hoedowns have been originally were either hornpipes or reels. There's one other tune. Let's see. There's a tune called Leather Britches. And so I've always heard the name for that came from the fact that they used to dry their beans, and they used to split beans halfway up, and they'd run a cord up through them and hang them outside the house to dry them. And when they dried like this, and leather breeches like they used to wear, or sheep, deerskin, would dry that way. So I guess that's what it is. So you go to England right now, and you go into a pub over there, and you ask for Lord MacDonald's reel, and this is the tune you'll hear. And I've heard bagpipers play it too. Leather breeches.
That's one. Not my favorite.
Well, remember,
need-
they've never heard it, so no
Yeah.
matter what you do,
You need to leave by Rosin over here. There's Richard.
Those are 18th century tunes as far as we know, you know. And so we'll move up into kind of the borderline here, the 19th century. You had, of course, nowadays just everything's attributed to the black syncopation and all that. But there was an exchange, there's bound to be. I've been to festivals where people from Africa were there. It didn't sound like this. And originally our music from the British Isles, from England, and everything didn't either, but there became a mix of these things. And so when you got to about the 1820s and 30s, around there, you had the beginnings of your minstrel tunes. And these were your traveling shows in the east, along the Tidewater states. There was enough population that they could move around like that. So you started having a lot of tunes come out that you still hear today that came from these minstrel era that we had. Let me back up. Let me just put one in here. The one you played one time, you got mixed up with Fisher's. That has a good story to it. The first circus to come over here came in the 1780s, and there was a dwarf that was a member of the cast of this circus. And there was a dancer, a man named Durangue, who was a dancer. And this Hofmeister was the dwarf's name. And he composed a bunch of tunes. Now you hear these fiddlers sometimes say, so-and-so wrote that. They didn't write it. They can't read music. They composed it. He's got a lot of his own tunes that we'll get to later. He didn't write them. He didn't sit down and know them. He composed them, you know. They always say, oh, so-and-so wrote
Me
that.
and my tape recorder.
Yeah. Anyway, this guy wrote a tune called Durangue's Hornpipe, which is still played, very popular tune. Let's play that Durangue's.
Okay, I'll
Kinda
probably
go through it short.
I'll probably play Fisher's.
Well, that's why
I never
got you
can
out
get
of
it
that
straight.
played it, don't need to play it, really. Another still played all over is another tune called Ricketts Hornpipe that this same guy wrote. And Ricketts was the man who had the circus. So and the reason we know these things is in the 1820s, Durangue wrote his memoirs, and that's where all this information came from. Now we get back to the minstrel tunes, and there's one now they play. It's amazing how these things hold their identity. I've got some sheet music from 1832 of this tune, or 34, and somebody that reads music played it, and it's exactly the same thing he'll play. Have you ever heard of Buffalo Gals? This is exactly the same tune. It was one that was composed then. And of course, they used to, this one particular minstrel show that started it, if they were in Cincinnati, it was Cincinnati Gals. If they were somewhere else, it was something else Gals. And I don't know where Buffalo struck, but the story was that Buffalo Gals were the gals, the daughters of joy, when they were building the Erie Canal, and that was what it was dedicated to. Who knows, you know. But the thing is, it was, let's play that Buffalo Gals sound. Remember that?
You know them words that ain't you coming out tonight to dance by the light of the moon? Evidently they didn't have a light. Buffalo Gal, what are you doing?
G, yeah.
I'll try this. Tilt. Yeah, I left it up with my boys. And I didn't want to make a 50-mile round trip to get them.
Lacey told me not long ago he bought the most expensive pair of hearing aids he could buy. It cost him a fortune. But they guaranteed he could hear a fly land on cotton. And I said, my gosh, what kind is it? And he said, Old Valley.
That's the way they do me. I got one I carry in the shirt pocket, and I wear earphones, and I can hear. But the trouble is, if I turn it up where I can really hear, if I can hear you talking there, this fiddle will sound like you standing in front of a siren on a fire truck and turn the whistle. You can't use it when you're playing. And you can't drive down the road in a car with it on. There's so much noise you can't believe it. So that's why I left it up for last night.
Let's see. I'm trying to think what you know on some of these era tunes or something. Well, we'll jump up there. You play Billy in the Lowground?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's in C.
C, yeah.
That's a hard thing. I'm too old to play Billy in the Lowground.
mournful sound, and that's another thing that kind of comes from the bagpipes and everything. Now, of course, the story with that one is that the Scottish that settled in North Carolina, some of them settled in the Low. They were Williams or something, the family, and some were down there. So, of course, Bill is the diminutive of William, so they say that's why they call them Billy in the low ground, and the Billy's in the high ground or something. Who knows, you know, this is what it is. Now, another dance, of course, all this music complemented some sort of dance. Everything they played at one time complemented some sort of dance. You'll hear 6/8, we'll play a 6/8 time jig in a minute here. They don't do any Irish jigging in the Ozarks. We really didn't have any Irish, as I call them, in this part. They got down about as far as Bourbon and down up in that area here, and of course the big urban area is a lot of Irish. But what we had were these Tennesseans who were, a lot of them were Scotch Irish, but British Isles and Welsh, there's a lot of Welsh came in the same way, you know. And so we don't have, I've never seen anybody dance like river dance or anything here, you know. But you do see the descendant of this, not clogging, but Ozark jig dancing. Now, there's a lot of similarities. And at one time they called what we call jig dancing, they called it clogging. But today, clogging is popular, but clogging is choreographed. And they all do the same step and everything. Whereas jig dancing is just like this music. The person develops his own style and everything. And that's just about gone. All this is about gone. All of this we're doing right now is very fragile. A lot of youngsters are learning to play the fiddle now. By that I mean this type of music. But since there's no square dancing to speak of anymore, the two used to complement each other, the square dancing and the fiddling. So you always had a fiddler in the community where they square dance. But now they don't square dance that much anymore. You'll run it. I don't know of any square dancing other. I don't mean this Western swing, where they have a guy with a record, how you swing them to the left and all that. I mean the kind over here in Douglas and Ozark County and Wright County and Eastern Christian County. If you want to see the old time square dancing, you can go over there and see it, and the jig dancing too. But now the youngsters that are involved in it over there have learned clogging in school, so you'll see a lot of clogging stuff. Now a lot of the stuff is the same. I mean, there's not that much difference. You go down there and you tell these people over in Douglas County that they're clogging, and boy, they'll let you know right away that they are not clogging. You know, they are jig dancing. And this goes in families. There's a lot of families around that were noted for their dancing. A lot of them are noted for their fiddling. Some of them are noted for their ballad singing and all that. This went with families back when families were close together, you know, and everything. This is really pure traditional stuff is what it is. But now a dance that came in just before the Civil War and was taking favor, especially in the South, and we still have it, is the waltz that came out of Europe. And you play Over the Waves?
Yeah.
Okay. Play. I got a good story. That's all right. I can see they don't know what it sounds like. So
I go under one once in a while.
This tune was written. This was written by a man named Rosin, who was a school teacher in Monterey, Mexico, and in the exposition in 1898 or whenever it was in New Orleans, this Mexican band came up here, and they were very popular. And this waltz was played there and really took off. And I feel very confident in saying that this waltz you're going to hear is the most played waltz in Western civilization. More than the Strauss waltzes, more than any of the Viennese, all that. This is the one that you'll hear in any country you go to. They'll be playing, all the fiddlers will be playing this type of music. And you may recognize the melody because there was a movie came out and they wrote a song to this melody, to the notes on this. I can't think of it. You love this evening and night or something. Well, let's just play this Over the Waves then. In G.
I used to think I could play there until I bought a record of Gordon Terry playing it, and then I knew I couldn't play it.
Well,
It's a pretty old song. G?
Yeah. let's see, now there's another dance that began in Scotland. I'm backing up again, I guess, really. No, about that same era, about the mid-19th century. That the Scots had for a lot of years, probably before then, and then they tired of it, but by then Europe took it up, and the Germans particularly took it up. And then it came back to the British Isles and back to this country, and it kept its German name, which is Schottish. They call it Scottish. And we never had this Schottish much down in here. I've seen a few people do it, but usually at the dances now, if you play a Schottish at the dance now, they'll do this, what I call this Billy Bob two-step, or this Cotton Eye Joe stuff that's popular in the nightclubs now, you know. That's what, because you can do that to the same tempo. But you get up in Minnesota and Michigan and Wisconsin and the Dakotas, and boy, you'll see the Schottish up there. They really dance. It's a very pretty dance. It's a 1, 2, 3 hop, but they have all sorts of variations, and some of them up there will. Oh, well, you're.
1, 2, 3 hop, 1, 2, 3 hop,
Yeah.
1 hop, 2 hop, 3 hop.
But they'll start off slow and then they'll speed it up. They have all sorts of variations to do. So play that Schottish you played, whichever one they did.
Is the Irish Washerwoman the Schottish, or
No,
what is it?
we'll play that mint. That's 6/8. That's a jig. That's a jig. That's a jig. 6/8 time. Yeah, we'll play that mint. Oh, I had you two dancing. That's some G. What'd you play? A G or?
What would I say? D, I believe.
G? Yeah, okay.
Is that Tales from Home?
Tunes from Home.
Tunes from Home?
Might be. Yeah, it might be. It might be.
Right
That's
tune
why
on.
we
Not
figure out what this is.
That's where you got to jump and skip and hop. Just like that.
They don't dance facing each other. Well, they might hold hands far out, but they'll usually side by side.
We do 2 people side by side.
Yeah.
When I was little, we did 4, all the cousins get together. And then on the 1 hop, 2 hop, 3 hop, the people in the front would go to the back.
Yeah. There's all sorts of configurations. Kind of like swimming, so you have all sorts of
Yeah,
different
and then
figures.
when you do 2 people, my aunts and uncles, they did all this dance and stuff, and they did their turns and stuff.
Yeah, if you watch it, really it's pretty when you watch the people that know how to do it. Oh, let's see here. We're back up then. Let's go back. Get into dance hall stuff, and let's see. Oh, here, we haven't played a jig yet. 6/8 time jig. Irish Washerwoman. That's an easy, that's what most of them play around here. We didn't have, like I say, they never danced a jig. It's an interesting thing, though. Even what we call a plug fiddler, one guy that maybe doesn't have much of a repertoire, but just about all of them will at least play one of all these different things we're playing. And just they would learn them that way. And like I said, we never had an Irish 6/8 time jigging, or there were some, but nothing, not enough to be indigenous for this region. But we'll play one you've all, I'm sure, called Irish Washerwoman.
You know, we don't hear that anymore. We don't play it. And 3 years ago, we was down Bass Cove in Uncle Buck's Pavilion playing up there, and a lady came up, and they're from Canada, and had this Irishman with him. He was from Ireland. He'd come up to Canada, and he was trying to find somebody to play the Irish Washerwoman, and they couldn't find it, and they came all the way down. And she said, "Would you know that?" And I said, "I used to know it, and I'd try to play it." So we played it, see. And he come up and thanked us, and when we got ready to leave, he got to go up the steps, you know. We was packed in there, and he come up and he said, "Could I just get you to play that for me one more time?" So Levi Roden got his guitar case, opened it up, and we stood there and played that for this old guy. And he was from Ireland, and he'd come over all that way, and he couldn't find anybody. You'd think that somebody would play that.
I run into, I've collected a lot. You'd be surprised.
He said he couldn't find it. This lady evidently was just a friend of his, and they were from Canada, and they said, "We couldn't find anybody." I don't even know if I can play it right or not. Let's say G. G in it. That's a weird one, I'll tell you that. Nobody ever plays that anymore. I can see why,
Oh, let's see.
really.
Now we'll move on up into the latter part of the 19th century, and we'll get into the rags and the music hall tunes, which some of these you'll maybe begin to recognize. I don't know, you're in a different world of music than we grew up with, see. And let's see, what about some rags around the turn of the century, around the late 19th?
I know
Right,
Bob
Beaumont.
Will's a Lone Star rag, but that ain't.
Beaumont.
Boy,
That's a
I'll
little
tell you now,
later, but that.
I can play it, but I'll make 52 mistakes on it.
Don't say that, see.
Okay, maybe it was 62. That's an F, ain't it?
Yeah, this is really, we're jumping around, because I don't know what he knows in that area in between there. This is really probably about the 30s or so, but this is still a carryover from the rags around the turn of the century and around actually from the late 19th century on up to the 20s and around in there. You've heard 5 Foot 2 Eyes of Blue and some of those. Those are kind of, this is more of a westernized type rag. Texas rag, more or less than anything. Play some of yours. Now, are you familiar with Joplin, Missouri?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. When I was young, it was getting about over, but boy, one of the roughest areas in Joplin was West 7th Street. That's where all the bars were. That's where he played. And what did you used to play out there? What kind of tunes did you play in those bars?
Everything, mostly what came off the records at Nashville, you know.
40s
just
down in there, yeah.
So we've got the distinction of being the only band who would throw it out of every bar in Joplin 5 times.
We had them over here, Camel Street. See, our rough area back in the 40s and around, and before then was Camel Street, because at that time Sears was down there. MFA Produce was, MFA Market was over on Market Street, and there was all these things. On Saturdays, you couldn't walk on Camel Street, or the square, either one. I mean, 'cause this was the center of this whole region. And traffic was just bumper to bumper. There was Ike Martin's store, really kind of like a big pawn shop, and they had live broadcast over KWTO from there, you know. And then there were about 8 bars all along there. And by Saturday afternoon,
Mean people.
man,
My band leader
all over
was,
the place.
he built like little Abner, and he liked to fight. And they'd black dust. They'd like a pack of wolves, and there'd be maybe 300 or 400 fighting at one time, and they'd turn the lights out and call the state police. And boy, you'd hide anywhere you could get. It was
Now, you wonder
terrible.
why I got a bad reputation?
I don't know how we ever stood it.
Well, old boy told me.
We couldn't keep a piano player. That old piano had dents in it where beer bottles had hit it. You couldn't believe. They finally outlawed beer bottles out there. Made them take them in paper cups. I'll tell you what, we had 2 cops, and the night that one of them got shot in Pike Cliff. Play your tune. We're so nervous we couldn't get up on the band thing. What do you want to hear?
I was gonna tell them too, an old square dances, this happened at a lot of them, and picnics in the rural areas. If somebody brought something besides lemonade and iced tea, you know, that's when the trouble usually started. Anytime there's drinking, I know where to go in the hills now. And if you go with me, you're always safe, because I can't run fast anymore. So I don't know where there's gonna be any trouble, but I've been a couple of places where I wished I hadn't been there. But he said, I always felt confident when I was playing for a square dance, because we were up on stage, and that was the safest place to be. If they didn't have beer bottles flying, you know, that's the only thing.
I don't know. It's
Well,
pretty
he's
good.
he's composed a bunch of tunes of his own here, and we'll just play some of those too, and then we'll get back into some historical stuff, I guess. Play something. What do you want to play? Play that Jasper County that you did, the Joplins in Jasper County. That's where.
I got back at them. I wrote a song about them. I was born in Joplin.
I was too.
27
I was
years
many
ago.
Years ago.
I tell you. I forgot it. Okay.
Play one.
The
What's it in?
Jasper County Radio.
D?
I have to think how that starts. Okay. C. G. That ain't it. Ashamed to tell them what name that one is.
I've forgotten what that is. I know.
Rosin in your
Oh,
eyebrows.
that's the rosin in your eyebrow.
Yeah. And boy, don't think we didn't just to get it. You go to a little one-room school or a little commission hall, play in there in a hot summertime with not even an electric fan, and board floor, and the dirt in them cracks. And they beat and stomp around in there and that dust, and you had to roll your bow about every 2 minutes. And leaning over that fiddle, I used to have real heavy eyebrows, and you couldn't, they were just all gummed up with that rosin in there. And I wrote that song.
What's another one you play? What's that Fiddler's March? Is that one?
Now that I wrote for a
You
dance.
wrote, you composed. You
Yeah,
wrote that
I
one.
wrote, no,
None of
I
this is
hummed
bad.
that
None of
one.
this is
I hummed that one up. That's S&D, ain't it?
I remember it now.
We used to play at the Bolivar for about 9 years in the DFE club, and they played what they called a waterfall. The ladies would come in from that side, and the gentlemen over, and they'd come in, make a heart, and go down, and hook their arms together and dance away from you. And they do all different kinds of stuff. It's a march, and we'd played every march. We wore them out, and I wrote this one, or put it together one time, and they really liked it. K breakdown.
That's an
Get
A,
that?
isn't it?
D. I think it's
D.
an A, ain't it?
That was an A, yeah.
Missed that one.
That's all
I
right.
can't play nothing right.
How are we doing on our time here? What do you want to? Well, you just let us know, dear. Oh, I don't know. Oh, I'll explain what I am. I'm called a second, but you'd call them compass, but in this world they call them seconds. And really what I am is a human metronome. That's the main purpose. This is a relatively recent thing. This didn't come in until after the Civil War in any numbers where they used them. They used to concoct all sorts of ways to help that fiddler hold his time. One thing they used to have was what's called fiddle sticks. And I can do it, but with me it's purely demonstration. I don't have them with me, I'll show you. And it's usually better on a cross-tuned fiddle. But what they did was while he was playing, usually a child or a wife or something, I've seen a lot of them that did grow up doing it, and they would beat the tune on the strings while he's playing, and they knew when he was going to be on what strings, and they could pretty well have their little thing matching what the melody was.
You know, funny thing, my mom first saw my dad at Fort Smith, Arkansas at the 4th of July picnic. Him and his buddy was riding a mule-powered merry-go-round. My dad playing the fiddle and his buddy was beating the strings on it, keeping rhythm. And Mom and them walked over and watched him play. That's the first time she'd ever seen him. So evidently she liked fiddle playing or something.
What they used to, if they had two fiddlers, what we just kind of refer to now as skillet licking, because there was a group that came out in the early 78s from Georgia that were really a popular group called the Skillet Lickers. Crazy, I think, the Skillet Lickers.
Do what?
I think those skillet lickers were crazy, those guys.
Yeah.
But,
You know,
but
I've
they
seen
did
it.
a lot of that.
I was
and,
lucky. I saw a mule-powered merry-go-round at Greenfield. We used to play there on Saturday night,
Yeah.
and they had a mule-powered merry-go-round. That's the only one I've ever seen. And then Clint Eastwood on the High Plains Drifter, they was a fiddle player in there, and the guy was beating the strings for him, and that's the only time I ever
Yeah.
seen that.
They have a mule-powered or horse-powered one down at Herman used to when they had their festivals, you know, and everything. But what they would do there, the skillet lickers did this a lot on the tunes, if they just didn't have any other instrument. One fiddle would chord while the other was playing, just like that.
Yes, chord.
And other things they'd use, this jawbone of an ass you had where they tap it. It's all those things, all those gimmicks were to help keep time. At contests, they always have them play hornpipe or a tune, well, usually a hornpipe. What do they have them play at contests? Usually a hornpipe, isn't it, or hold down,
Hold down, and a waltz, and a tune of choice.
and a waltz. The waltz is usually in the middle. And a lot of guys will come out occasionally without a second and play. And if you time them, and I've seen them do this, the first time he goes through that waltz is at one speed. The second time will be a little faster. It is really an exceptional person that can hold their time on slow. Now, fast tunes you can get away with it, but on slow tunes to hold the same time when you play a tune through three times, it's really unusual.
About 80% of your backup guitarists, if you go to fiddle contest, they'll crowd you. And
Speed up, yeah.
I know one upright bass player that'll walk you off stage, boy. He just work you right out. You start out a waltz and you're playing a schottische and you get through it.
Hey, you mentioned that you're familiar with schottisches. At West Plains 2 weeks ago with their festival, they really have some good square dances down there. It's one of the best I've seen. And we were playing, and this young fiddler from Washerwoman was there. One of the girl players in there. We're having trouble with women. They're taking this whole thing over. I heard an old man say not long ago, we should never let them vote. I'm beginning to. Anyway, she said, play him a schottische. Well, he knew one schottische. So that's something new to most. There was one couple that had done a schottische. I talked to him later, and he said, well, I couldn't really go at my legs bad anymore, but he said, but I could. The others all did this side-by-side Cotton Eye Joe stuff, you know. Well, he played it through at schottische speed, and then he sped it up. And then he sped it up again. And by the time he finished, he was doing this square dance speed. And that's the funniest thing. I wish I'd have had a camera on. They were about to break their necks trying to keep up. But all this music, you know, you can still run into a lot of this. But like I say, the media is so powerful nowadays with your generation and younger, now the younger ones too, that it's pretty well told. You're indoctrinated with what you're to be used to listening to. And this is really just kind of hanging on. I don't know in a couple of more generations, because like I say, these young people are learning it, but you're not going to sit and look at each other and play hold
Most
downs
of your
all
real
day.
good fiddle players are going to this West Texas
They're
style.
going to contest
Beautiful.
style, but it's not
just so
danceable.
far over your head, you just sit and listen. That's all you.
It's-
You don't bet there's how many? Suppose there's 20 young fiddlers, but 15 and younger. That is absolutely mind-boggling to hear them play.
Oh,
You
there's-
can't believe how good these little bitty kids are playing.
But what they do is, if they get into contest fiddling, they either go into contest fiddling or they go into bluegrass, which really doesn't promote the traditional stuff. This a lot of the bluegrass stuff. But if there's like they were along with the preacher and the doctor and the granny woman, you know, and all that. And they were either glorified in the community or they were vilified, because see, it's taken on a risk thing now, and still that's pretty well gone now. But still, you run into a lot of churches still won't let a fiddle, won't let a violin in the church. I had one time my partner, who's dead now, Art Galbraith, when we used to tour a lot, and one time at a festival. On the grounds, we play on the grounds where you have a constantly moving crowd. We were through, and he was standing over holding his fiddle, and this woman came up to me. Of course, I was a guitar player. I'm not as bad as he was. And she said, and she was dead serious. She said, "You see that instrument he has?" She said, "You see that scroll on the top of that?" She said, "That's the devil's hand, hurling to take him down to damnation." And she was absolutely sure about that. And I know a lot of. Another thing out here, I've collected. In the last 30 years, about 3,000 hours of this. And I've collected over 500 fiddlers. And of those 500 fiddlers, about a dozen or more are women. Now see, this was always a man's world. Now there were a lot of women played the fiddle, and in some communities it was all right. But in most communities, first of all, in a lot of communities, because of the church, the fiddle and fiddler were bad enough, but my good. A woman's fiddler was the worst thing you could ever hear of, you know. She was to stay home, have babies, raise them, and take care of the home, you know. She wouldn't have to be playing for dances, especially, you know.
Were married women allowed to dance?
Oh, the square dances they danced, but even then, a lot of communities were split on that. A lot of communities didn't. Now, what they did, it's always been interesting to me, they concocted play parties. And all play parties are a square dance without music. Now, a piano was okay. But you wouldn't dare bring a fiddle into play for a play party. In fact, most play parties didn't have any instrumental music to them at all. But the dances they did, or the games they played, were fiddle figures, square dance figures is what they were. So it gets pretty interesting.
So what was the play party? I've heard my grandmother talk about, like, she's dead now, but play parties.
Oh, yeah.
What are play parties?
They'd have games. What they take is say a square dance figure like two lobes back and forth, and then two of them break off and go through and around like this. The hobo's trying to get over the wall. But they'd make a game out of it and do it tempo would be clapping their hands, see.
There's no music.
Like in kindergarten, no music. Now, like I said, some of them later on it, and they had verses they would chant to these, you know. There's a really good video that Arkansas College put out on folk dancing. And the first part of it's kind of Silver Dollar Cities a little bit. They kind of overdid the dramatization of it, but what they used to call frolics, which were, what they usually did there was take, you'd see them dance, they write about dancing to what we call the Virginia reel and stuff like that, you know, where they go fast back and forth, that line dancing, kind of like concert dancing is now. But, and they go all up to ballroom dancing. You can have a copy of that sometime. It really is, it's a good film. But let's see, I digress. Let's play some music instead of hearing me talk, just anything. Play some of the common stuff that you hear nowadays, that Soldier's Joy, Liberty, 8th of January.
Let's
Any
play
of those.
Liberty.
Okay.
Give me liberty or a couple of million, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Begins to tell on you.
Yeah, well.
If you play the Orange Blossom Special.
Well, not really. Now, I hate to hurt your feelings, but this is a tune. I haven't collected that 10 times out of probably 2,500 tunes that I've collected. Fiddlers never play it. It's a tourist thing. It's something that it always, well, now, if you were going to work at Branson, you damn well better know how to play Orange Blossom Special, because that's what the crowd wants. That's all they know. And if you can play it on your back, behind your head, or between your legs, it drives an evil wilder, you know. But most fiddlers, some of them will play it, you know, but most of them consider it just a trick tune. It's not much of a melody to it. It's all the gyrations you go through while you're playing it, you know. And if we played it, you'd leave the room. Because I bet I haven't seconded that thing. You know, when we went up, Bob Walsh, who was our conservation agent down in Stone County, was a fiddler, and he promoted making the fiddle Missouri State Instrument. And I went with him when we went up. First time played for the House Committee, and the second time for the Senate Committee. And guess what they wanted to hear? Orange Blossom Special. I think that may have been one of the few times I've ever played it. But there's so many beautiful tunes. I mean, you can't believe the beautiful waltzes that are in this music. And this is all, the waltzes didn't really get into where you've got a mixture. The Swedes, my gosh, the Swedes and the Norwegians, they have whole towns that play the violin, you know. And a lot of these tunes come from there. And they have also, we do a lot of what's called twin fiddling, where not just two guys playing the same melody, but one plays the melody and the other plays harmony to it. They had two harmonies going from the Scandinavian countries. I've seen them in Morrison when I've been there. It's the most beautiful stuff you'll ever hear, you know. But nobody knows about those tunes, you know. Maybe they don't want to know about those tunes. I don't know.
Well, is there a premier piece?
What do you mean?
Well, like the tourists always ask for Orange Blossom Special. Is there a fiddler piece preferred? the piece that?
Oh, well, there's a bunch of good tunes. You know, the one thing, like when I used to play with my partner, we played a lot of places where we had big audiences and stuff. And one thing I always noticed, though, is the audience all were doing symphony. The captain, you don't see that as symphony. I don't mean that. I go with symphony, but it's the rhythm and everything about it, you know. But the other tune that probably would be the most played would be Black Mountain Rag. And it's not a rag at all. It may have been at one time, I don't know, but it's a hoedown speed. Fast, 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 you know. And they want the faster is the better. And people have been conditioned to this, that fast is best. A lot of the young fiddlers, my gosh, they play so fast you can't keep up with them, some of these young ones.
Yeah.
And that destroys a lot of these tunes because they can't hit all the notes in them. There's no way. You can do it in a hoedown. The difference between bluegrass, now I play a lot of bluegrass, so I'm not knocking that, but this music is music by choice. And if a fiddler makes a change, he's made it on his own because it sounds better to him. You start out with bluegrass, then you went to new grass, then you went to progressive grass. And I don't know what all that, now what that is the thing that's helped this hold its identity is it never became marketable. Bluegrass became marketable. So as soon as the sales start to drop, they need a new gimmick. So they introduce something else into it, and it becomes market-driven rather than traditional-driven. Now, there's a lot of bluegrass of the old original that's still around, though, but it's kind of like this. You really won't hear it that much because they want to get some of these wild things introduced into it, you know, and all that. Oh, I'm running out of things to say. I'm hesitant to have him start talking because I don't know what he's going to say.
You gonna play one?
Yeah, what? Play what?
Do you remember George Strait's Fort Worth, Texas, On My Mind?
No, that's Bach.
You remember that?
That's
It's
a song,
a good
yeah.
dance too. Yeah. I believe it's in D. I'm not sure.
Get me out of my world now.
Yeah, it's in D.
Okay.
My knees going out. My knees are going out, that thing.
That's the song.
Time I got a new
Yeah.
set, I guess.
Yeah, most of these tunes in traditional fiddle were never songs. A lot of them, they put words to them. Lately, I mean, over the years, they've added words to them. But most of them were just dance tunes is what they were, you know. Oh, I don't know. What else you want to do? What play, let's see.
Okay, I play one called Little Coquette. That's a
you
good
got
one. That's an
all
old,
these crooked stuff
old
here. You know,
standard.
I haven't played them with you before.
Oh, that's.
This is from the
See.
20s. I knew a fiddler over at
G.
called Little Coquette.
Everybody plays Coquette.
I said there was a fiddler over at Pineville called that Little Croquet. But there's another tune called, an old tune in A, Angus Camel. Did you ever play Angus Camel?
No.
Anyway, it's really one of the old ones they trace back. And you go down to Ozark County, they call it Agnes Camel. And one time at a contest down in Arkansas, we heard a guy called it Angus Cattle. One of the best ones, though, is there was a fiddler down in Springdale, Arkansas, named Cotton Combs. You remember Cotton Combs?
I've heard of it.
Fayetteville, lived in Fayetteville. And old Cotton was, well, he had a little trouble, I think, that way, but was just the smoothest fiddler you'd ever hear. He smoked his cigarettes till you thought, my, he's going to burn his lips, but he always spit it out about then. But he really had trouble with names. Let's see, he called La Golondrina, he called Golden Dreamer. Well, that's not so bad. And then he had, I don't know, a couple other, Durham's bull he called Burl Durham. But the one that's always good, there's a real pretty waltz. You play Westphalia?
Play at it.
Okay, well, we'll play here, and it's really it's a very common play. Yeah. Westphalia Waltz, but every time he played, he'd say, I'm now going to play the West Sedalia Waltz. And with my partner and I, we did a couple of concerts up in Sedalia years ago, and after it was over, I told this story. They all wanted to, if we had a copy of that West Sedalia Waltz, But, oh, it gets wild on some of them. Play that Westphalian G. Better be.
G get it.
See any of this I've been talking about. Are you all teachers? Is this a graduate class? And where are you all from? Where are you?
I'm from Michigan.
Oh, you teach up there?
No, we live here in Springfield.
Yeah. Or any of you live over around Mansfield? Or teach at Mansfield? Well, Mansfield, every Thursday night, is one of the best public jams there is. You go take 60, and at the second exit, there's a Conoco big convenience store. You turn off there, and you go down, what would be maybe a block and a half or so, 2 blocks, and up on your right, you'll see a display area, and one of these glass fronts with cars in it, and the big metal building behind it. It's an auto auction place. And every Thursday night, they start around 6 or so. And the thing that's good about it is, like I said, the variety of this music is what keeps it interesting to me. Over in this corner will be traditional fiddling and square dancing, and the building's big enough that they don't bleed on each other. Over here will be bluegrass, and then there's usually one or two groups, and they're kind of divided by walls of singing, a mixed bag of old songs, pop songs, and everything else. But and there's no trouble there at all. Take anybody there. And I bet there's the little public jams, or I tell you, here, might as well get involved here. The smallest unit of the whole thing is house parties, or house parties. And they may be in an old store building, an old school, or an old church. And what those are, the best one I go to is down McClurg. And if you know where McClurg is, it's just about 3 miles east of Brown Branch. And if you know where Brown Branch is, it's about 8 miles east of Bradleyville, or you know where Bradleyville is. But one of the big things there is not only the music, but the food. And they bring some of the best cooks around. And there's a bunch of those, and they're usually, like I say, coming from Springfield, I'd be about as far away as you come. It's usually pretty much a neighborhood thing. And you'll hear, there's one on 160 called an old schoolhouse, Johnson Schoolhouse, which is on past, on past Forsyth. But you know where Mark Twain, you know where 125 goes on down to Pro Tem and 160 turns. It's back up this way a little bit between there and Forsyth. But you'll hear some of the best singing. I tell you, the Ozarks abounds in good singers. You don't hear them on TV and you don't hear them on the radio or anything, but these people have sung together, most of them, since they were children, and usually in the churches. And you'll really hear some good singing. 2-part harmony, 3-part harmony, and a lot of quartets too, and they're really good. And then you move up to a place like Mansfield, which is a bigger jam, big public jams. Marshfield has one once a month. Stratford used to have one. These are all over. Pleasant Hope has one. Clio, which we say Cleo, they call it Clio down south of Aurora. These are all over the Ozarks. And they are a little different. And most of them will have a lot of these. You just sit. If any of you play an instrument and you want to go, take it to these things. These people are the most tolerant up to a point. But you'll learn more there than you would from any book or anything, because they'll be more than, if they think you're trying to learn this stuff, they'll be more than happy to help you, Then you go up to what would be like McDowell's, is the biggest one I know around here south of Aurora. What I call really kind of an amateur hour, they call it a jamboree. But what they do, they have an old schoolhouse and there's a stage, and there's quite a few like this. And you start getting there, have a blackboard, and everybody signs up. And they've gone, I never have stayed this long, but they've gone till like 2 in the morning, getting through that. And I shouldn't say this, but sometimes by 9 or 9:30, I have to leave, or I'll never be able to carry a tune again. Because really, some of the people are not the best, but the thing about it is, it's not that. That has nothing to do with it. The thing is that some of these people that get up there on stage and they get to sing for 10 or 15 minutes, this is the biggest thing in their life, because they come from very poor backgrounds and probably have very little, and the audiences are always polite. They sit out there and talk while you're playing, but you're still listening. I don't see how they do it. But they're really a good thing, and they'll come from as far away as Joplin and the Osho to these. They'll come from a bigger, down Arkansas. A lot of people from Arkansas come up together. I always said there should never have been a South Missouri nor North Arkansas. It should have been the state of the Ozarks, because the same people came up the White River and settled, And then you get like Oldfield down here is the best known around here, which is really kind of a miniature Branson show. They have a stage and they have a set band that plays, and they may have a guest artist every once in a while. But they're local people and everything. And then, of course, your fifth venue would be the square dancing. And the best one of these that's left is the 4th Friday of every month is at Cabool. And if you want to see really good old-time square dancing, you'll see it there. They'll have as many as 10 sets going at a time, which is really a lot of, and they come from as far away as Potosi and Mountain Home, Arkansas, and Springfield and everything to dance at these things. And that's about the most, all the public things that you can go to in this part of the country. But there really are a lot of them now. There's an awful lot of them. I don't know, we about run out here. You awake?
You gonna play one more than run
Yeah,
off?
yeah,
Let's
that's-
play the guitar polka. The G.
I haven't heard one actually. We'll see what happens here.
Well, I'm mixed in with them schottisches and stuff. This is an easy one. Bill Boyd had it out during World War II.
What's this one? G?
Are you ready?
Yeah, go ahead. Never heard that.
That's a little deep.
I might give it, I'm in the wrong place to give a plug for this, but SMS's festival will be the first weekend in September. And they have what they call Fiddler's Green. Fiddler's Green in mythology is the place next to hell where all fiddlers go. And on Saturday night, all the dance hall girls from hell come over and dance, and all that, so it's in the store. So we have Fiddler's Green there. And there'll be a big variety of fiddlers. And then this year, a program I put on for 3 years now out at the Library Center, it was called The Next Generation, which is young fiddlers. And we've always had around 10 young fiddlers there. And we're going to do that at SMS too, this time at Ellis Hall, in the recital hall there. And got about 9, I got to pick one more up somewhere. And these will all be from about 6 up